The Heckler & Koch UMP45 is one of H&K's most memorable and recognisable systems, especially amongst those who have played Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. The UMP45 was the weapon of choice for those literally incapable of using anything else, the barely above one-man army users. Evidently this still bothers me. But it is a gorgeous piece of engineering nonetheless, and I wanted an SMG for a HPA build. So I bought this Double Eagle M89 UMP45 replica, and I was actually planning on slowly upgrading this until I eventually chucked in a HPA engine. And I've been heavily inspired to do this by Airsoft Camman with his legendary MP5 with the Polar Star Jack. I wanted a quiet and compact primary for sneaking about, but as you'll find out, that plan may have changed already. Now this UMP, granted it's got a few attachments on, weighs roughly around 2.2 kilograms, which is about 5 pounds and whatever that is in ounces. With the stock folded, the UMP is roughly 18 inches long, which is approximately 47 centimeters. And with the stock unfolded, it is round about 27.5 to 28 inches, which is more or less 70 centimeters. And the relatively lightweight is due to this replica's mostly polymer construction. And Double Eagle have done a frankly incredible job with the externals. The plastic used is matte, has this sort of rougher texture to it, and it doesn't shine like the cheaper plastics. It honestly looks and feels a lot more posh than a lot of other airsoft guns I've encountered in the same price bracket, and even some replicas worth at least twice as much. Now granted, I've only used this thing once, but there is no creaking whatsoever. It feels absolutely stout and solid. The stock at the rear is a skeletal G36 style stock, and there is absolutely no play in this whatsoever. You can fold it in by pushing this button like so, and it can then be hooked over this hook here to hold it out the way, and then you can unhook it, snap it back into play. And like I said, that is absolutely solid. I've never encountered a folding stock like that with no play whatsoever, not even on like the Amoeba and the G36. The grip is also equally as solid, and it has this stupid finger divider here. I do not like these at all. I find that they just dig into my finger. I'd rather this just be smooth, but other than that, the grip's all right. The selector switch is very reminiscent of the G36, and it is fully ambidextrous. And you have your safe, your semi, and your full auto. And the gearbox inside appears to be a plain old version 3, so nice and easy to get bits for. And the trigger also shares a lot in common with the G36. And if you're like me, your heart also sank when you found out about this. G36 AEG triggers are frankly awful. I don't usually care about a long trigger pull, but these are always very clunky, sort of Tommy Tippy's my first trigger. So rapid semi-auto fire with this thing is quite difficult, but I prefer a curved trigger to a straight trigger, so they got that right. The funny thing is though, a rarity for me, I've actually been using this thing on full auto a lot more than I have on semi. I like the fire rate on this. It's not too fast, not too slow, so you can have some nice control sustained bursts. The trigger guard is also very spacious, all the better for using gloves with this thing. And like your uncle's McLaren, this has a flappy paddle on it. In this case, it is the ambidextrous magazine release. Although I haven't had to reload this thing that often because I've been using this one mag that it came with, which is a 450 round high cap. And even on quite a busy game where there's a lot of gunfights going on, I've managed to make this last throughout the whole game, even when sending a lot of people back to respawn with this thing. And again, because of the slower fire rate, it means you can really pin down targets. You don't just empty your mag immediately at them. The mag is loaded via this trapdoor at the top, and then you have a wheel on the bottom, as you'd expect for a high cap. This mag has fed nearly perfectly, aside from one instance where it apparently failed to feed. Don't know why it happened, but amongst all the bedlam and mayhem that was going on, I might have just not wound it properly. On the left side of the receiver, you have a bolt catch that is partially functional. It doesn't affect the gearbox in any way, but if you rack back the charging handle here and lock it up like an MP5, it will actually expose the hop unit in the ejection port. And then if we push the bolt catch in at the bottom and then release the bolt, it will hold the mock bolt assembly back until you push it. Now this doesn't actually affect the functionality in any way, but it gets bonus points for having a semi-functional bolt release. And because the charging handle is very reminiscent of the MP5, you can do the HK slap. Although you should probably not do it too hard and not too often, because I broke this off my MP5 and I'm pretty sure you could break it off this too. And with the ejection port open, you can access the hop unit. Now this hop unit appears to be proprietary, and it's a sliding style hop. You push it forward for more hop, pull it back for less. Now I did strip the hop unit down and cleaned it out when I first got this thing because it was completely full of grease. Now the hop unit seems to work reasonably well out of the box, although I did file down the hop arm slightly because I was concerned it would over hop. Although I now have to apply full hop to get the trajectory I want, so in hindsight I should have tested it before fiddling with it. The barrel inside I believe is about 209mm, and it's a 608 standard bore. It works okay, but if you want to upgrade anything on this gun, Start off with the barrel. The buckings inside the hop unit, incidentally, they appear to be standard buckings, so the barrel and the bucking should be easy to upgrade with something a bit more impressive. On the top of the receiver and on the sides and the bottom of the handguard, you have some Picatinny rail. Unfortunately, there is no threading on the muzzle, and it loses points for this. You have this removable piece here. I say removable, I can't bloody get it off. But underneath, apparently there are no threads. It's just basically an interference fit, this little adapter here. And because of that, that's kind of complicated things for the stealthy HPA build. There are sling mounts aplenty on the UMP. You have two on the front here, you have one there, and you have your two on your stock. And you've got one there too, how could I forget? To access the battery compartment, you want to fold the stock, and then inside the hinge you have this little trap door, and it's wide to tammy it out of the box, and there is no fuse installed in this thing, so just be careful with that. And I wouldn't go too mad with your batteries. You probably don't want to put an 11-1 in it. I've been using the stock battery, which is this big long stick one, and this is an 1150 milliamp hour 8.4 volt battery. And as usual for any Airsoft AEG I own, I've managed to choose one with bugger all battery space. But as you can hear, that's more than enough for me. You don't need a faster fire rate than that. That's perfectly controlled. It makes your ammo last, and it's more than enough to pin people down. The iron sights are very reminiscent of the G36C. You can either have an aperture or a notch. And after zeroing this with a laser bore sight out to roughly 55-60 meters, I found that this thing is very effective at mid-range, about the 45-50 meter mark, but it could still reach out to about 50-55 meters if pushed. And whilst it wasn't as accurate at that range, a volley of full auto fire would definitely start to render the situation untenable at the other end. It doesn't shoot as well as, say, my Bolt AK, but that's got a tight bore in it, and that's also right on the limit. And as it bedded in throughout the day, I felt like the accuracy was improving, so you got to bear in mind this thing is basically brand new. Unfortunately though, my cameras were dicking around. I've only just got my replacement GoPro, so I had to use another head camera, but I did get some scope cam footage with this, albeit without audio. So if you want to see a montage of this in action, then make sure you keep watching till the end of the video. The velocity out the box was bang on the 350 FPS limit, and that was until I stripped it down to sort out the hop unit, as I mentioned earlier. Now I'm getting about 340-ish, if I've worked it out right. It was 300 FPS at the last game on 2.5s, and they knock about 40 FPS off. But unfortunately though, it wasn't all sunshine and happiness. When I was preparing the UMP for its first game day, as well as cleaning the hop unit out and cleaning the barrel out, I also wanted to check the motor height. And the motor height can be adjusted by removing this plate here, and then there's a small grub screw on the bottom of the motor cage. And this is when I found out that the motor cage actually wobbled on the bottom of the gearbox, and I thought, okay, then I guess I'll have to tighten it up. So I took the gearbox out to tighten up the motor cage, and I found out that the screws holding it on were as tight as they could be. And they'd basically bent the lugs of the motor cage inwards slightly, and that still wasn't enough to hold it in place. And that's not great, because that's going to balls up the engagement between the pinion and the bevel gear in the gearbox. It's just going to wear things down, and it means you can't really adjust the motor height for as long as it's doing that. And then it got worse, because the solution I had to sorting out the motor cage was I took it off and I was going to put some shims on the lugs, so that way it would be shimmed against the gearbox casing and it would hold it tight. And that worked. But whilst taking the motor cage off, I then found out that the pinion was loose on the motor shaft. Now this is a D-shaped pinion, so it's for a D-shaft motor. So with a D-shaft pinion, you have a little set screw that holds it onto the shaft, and it didn't have one. So this thing was just sliding up and down on the motor shaft. And what's even worse than that, there aren't even any bloody threads cut into this thing. You can't even just chuck a grub screw in because there's no threads in it. And this really soured my opinion of the Double Eagle UMP. The motor pinion is supposed to be screwed on for a reason. You do not want this thing sliding back and forth inside the gearbox. It's probably unlikely to fall off, but it's just going to wear itself down and the bevel gear down a lot quicker than it's supposed to. And you're never going to be able to shim it or adjust the motor height to the correct level with this thing sliding around. You're never going to get it right. Now, this is obviously a quality control issue, I imagine. At least I'd like to think it's a quality control issue, and this is not them trying to save a few quid. But this and the motor cage wobbling around, it really soured my opinion of this gun. Because this thing is gorgeous, it's really well put together, it feels solid, it looks really good, it doesn't look like a toy. But, you know, this sort of thing, you know, it's just going to kill it. It's just going to wear things down. Don't get me wrong, this is not a deal breaker for me, and I've seen far worse QC on guns worth far more than this. But it's a real disappointment given how much of this Airsoft gun Double Eagle got right. They were so close to perfection, so close to greatness with this thing, and they still are. Sharpen up your QC a little, and this thing is a very good pick for not just beginners, but anyone wanting a fun little AEG that will get the job done. And using something like this over fancier replicas like, say, my Bolt AK, it definitely gives you an experience that is often lost in Airsoft, using a simple bit of kit with a low hassle loadout for some good old shootouts. Just ignore the RPG I had on that loadout. I forgot to mention I pulled the replacement pinion off another motor, stuck it on that shaft, and it seems to work fine. Overall, I think this Double Eagle UMP45 AEG is a really nice bit of kit, and with some improvements to their QC, I think this easily will be a contender for a beginner's airsoft gun. And as for the HPA build I was planning with this thing, well, I'm not so sure anymore. I quite like it as it is. If you enjoyed this review, then please make sure you leave a like, and if you want to be part of the channel, then please make sure you subscribe too. If you want to support what I do, then make sure you check out fulcrumairsoft.com and Fulcrum Airsoft on Cults 3D. And I promised you a bit of footage with this, so we'll end on that. Unfortunately, I didn't have any audio on the scope cam, and the footage was incomplete with other cameras dicking around, so I'll just chuck some dainty stock music on it, but I hope you enjoyed nonetheless.